had a very real conversation at home, my husband and I was like, look, I am at my wit's end. I am miserable with like life in general. If I fall on my face, worst case scenario, we file bankruptcy and move on with life. My husband didn't work. His job was the house, and the plan was that he was going to be the stay-at-home parent. So my income was the only income. I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have a laptop. I couldn't work from home. They gave me a part-time back office position with a laptop and a cell phone and allowed me to work from home. And within 3 months, I worked myself out of a job and doubled my business so that I didn't need that income anymore.
Welcome to another episode of Founders Growth. My name is John Hill, aka Small Mountain. I'm the founder of Adapted Growth. And today on the show, we have Kathrine Farris. She is the founder of Marketecs, which is a marketing agency that she has been running for a very long time. And we got connected, and I was blown away by how long she had been in the space. And so we're going to dive into some of her story and how she got to here and some of the things that she's learned along the way. Kathrine, can you talk a little bit, maybe with some better detail, about the kind of work you're doing and maybe who you work with?
Yeah, sure. And first of all, John, thanks for having me on. I know I came at you at a little bit of an interesting way. I reached out to you, which you don't typically even do. So I appreciate you having that conversation with me and bringing me on the show. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so a little bit about what we do. So we have been in this space since 2009 as a marketing agency. So over 16 years. I lose track of the time sometimes. We definitely, it's evolved over the years as far as where our focus is and what we do, but we help professional service-based businesses for the most part. So mostly consultants and coaches, lawyers, CPAs, sort of anybody that feels like they are a consultant in their own industry sort of can fall into that category. And as far as what we typically do, it's marketing support and services, everything from soup to nuts. We can be a full marketing team, but more in the last 2 years, we've gravitated toward the technology side more and more and really going into heavy marketing automations.
Mm.
And so a lot of people, may have a VA or may even have a marketing assistant or somebody like that. And they're just the technical side is still maybe a little bit over their head. So we can still partner with them even if they have a small team. And that's kind of been part of this recent evolution.
I love that. And I would love to kind of jump into like that whole thing just really quick, right? Because we were talking right before we hit record around how like people get very excited about automations and process and AI is now very, very popular and everything else like that. Where, in your work with clients, right? Where do you have to potentially redirect them, change their thinking, change their mindset around automations, AI, scale, and different things like that? Does that show up for you a lot in your conversations?
Pretty much every conversation. Yes. So we will have clients that are very sort of excited about automation and they will try to automate too quickly. And a lot of times I will sort of have a rule of thumb of, all right, let's run through a process manually, at least 3 times before we start talking about automation. Let's tweak it. Let's, write out the SOPs. Let's do all of this stuff. And even then, maybe we automate like the first half that feels very solid and very consistent and keep doing a couple of the human in the loop positions on some of the other. Right. So I'm not for 100% automation out of the gate. I do feel like it's usually a process, usually an evolution. But we do have people that I still will hear they're doing something and they've been doing it for 13 years. And I'm like, we can automate that, right? You don't still have to book those appointments. You don't still have to, so it goes both ways. And a lot of times it's just, that's the whole point of we have to have the conversation to figure it out. I have to actually see what your business operations are, hear how you want to use your system to be able to know, is that a pipeline? Is that an automation? Is that, is there a human process in there? And then you go one step further and you start talking about AI, how much of this can literally be done by robots. And there are pieces that can be, and maybe it's you need the prompt. Maybe it's you need the brainstorming because, your team is not available 24/7. And as a business owner at 2 a.m, you have a brilliant idea. And so we build you a custom GPT that knows your business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that whole thing of let's do this 2 or 3 times, or maybe let's automate the
Mhm.
first half, right? Because, when like I treat sales as a process and try to work on, okay, let's have some consistency and some repeatability, right? And so people will like that and they will come and they want to try to build a process that that doesn't map to reality in any way, shape, or form, And
Mhm.
so one of the things that I've had to be better at is kind of, okay, how many how much volume do you have going through this thing that we're trying to like improve and bring some consistency to? Because it's super easy to think you can build it in the lab, right? And especially with things like growth, right? Anything around marketing and sales and everything, anything you build in the lab has got to be tested
Mhm.
in reality. And a lot of people skip that step because they're very excited to kind of focus on product or focus on growth or focus on these other things and stuff like that. Um, do you
Absolutely.
get a lot of pushback from people when you're trying to tap the brakes and like, okay, let's have some sense around the reality around this? Or are you at a place to where most of your people kind of come in the door, kind of understanding what they're getting into?
Yeah, no, I don't get a lot of resistance. I mean, I won't say never, but I don't get a lot of resistance. I think in more often than not, they appreciate it if I can come at it saying it, and I try to bring examples, and I try to say like, okay, but what happens if somebody responds this way, or what happens if somebody respond like all the use cases when you start raising those flags, they start to go,
Hmm.
oh yeah, okay, that does need a manual review. Oh, okay. And sometimes it's as simple as like somebody's filling out a form and there's a 1 through 10 and okay, well if they fill out 9 and 10, you want it to do something. If they fill out 1 and 2, you want it to do something. But what about that middle iffy bracket? What if they simply didn't understand the question? What if, like
Yeah,
all the what ifs you start raising and then they start going, "Oh yeah, I didn't think about that." And that's the
absolutely.
kind of experience that they expect or want, or that's the reason they called me, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of our clients we've worked with for a very long time. I should also caveat, I mean, we have clients we've worked with since 2013 on retainer. So when I say something, it's I know their business, right?
Hmm.
And so I could say, yeah, well, okay, but what about, Mr. Jones when he did XYZ last month? How would that have worked in this scenario?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And being deep enough that like you have real examples when you're going back to kind of challenge them to make sure that they're thinking about it the right way. Like
Mhm.
huge part of this. Um, changing topics wildly because we when we connected, you shared a story about going out on your own.
Mm.
Can you talk a little bit about how you found yourself on your founder's path?
Yeah. So, and I think I touched upon this briefly in our pre-meeting here.
Hmm.
So prior to being in marketing, being an agency owner, I was actually in banking full time. I actually started as a part-time teller back in college, worked my way up through the front end of banking. Prior to 30 years old, I was a branch manager, VP, commercial lender, the whole 9 yards. So
Hmm.
all retail side of banking and community banking, not a
Yep.
big conglomerate per se. So I was working very closely with business owners. At the same time, I was also teaching computer courses at the local community college in the evening. I had gotten married not too far prior to that, and we were rehabbing a foreclosure from basically the ground up. You could see the outside from the inside. It was with new roof, like the whole 9 yards. Okay, so like all of this stuff is going on, and I was running my business, moonlighting, running my business on the side. And that it wasn't a lot of income. It was just enough that I was sort of dabbling in it at
Hmm.
this time. And part of the reason that even came up was because I literally got known in my community as like the banker that knew technology. I mean, my customers, because I worked with business customers, would come in and bring their laptops to me and be like, "Hey, you know tech. How do I do this on my computer?" And I would start solving these problems. So I started this business. That's how I started it. But at this
Wow.
point, yeah, at this point, I had been in it for a few years. It was like 2012. I had been
Hmm.
in it for a few years, doing this moonlighting, teaching at the same time, or doing all this other stuff. And we were planning on a family. It happened a little sooner than we expected, and I was pregnant. And
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, something's got to give. Like there's just too many balls in the air at this point. So of course the house was, getting finished up, and that had a deadline on it.
Hmm.
So I gave up teaching. I had been teaching for 4 years in the evening, and I gave up teaching, figuring that felt like something I could let go. So then I was down to, okay, I've got my business and I've got my full-time career with all the benefits and all the vacation time and
Oh
all
yeah.
the whatever, right? Um, and my husband didn't work. His job was the house, and the plan was that he was going to be the stay-at-home parent. So my income was the only income. My
Hmm.
insurance was the only insurance, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. So I
That
took,
is
yeah.
like when we talked about this, we didn't talk about the house or the teaching or anything else like that. Like
Hmm.
holy crap.
Yep.
Um, one of the things that I talk about with people is that first sell is that like you're allowed to do this, you should do this, you're enough to do this and everything. What was the decision making process for you about staying versus going? How'd you
Mm.
get to the clarity that was the right path?
Yeah, so I had my son. I had my maternity leave, which I falsely believed would be a great time to grow my business. Yep, anyone who has ever had a baby and had a maternity leave knows what I mean.
Yep.
I thought it was going to be brilliant. And I went back to work. I went back to my banking job. And I will say, like, there was definitely there was a thought process around this idea of not wanting to, and I don't even know how to word this so that it doesn't maybe come off wrong, but not wanting to be the woman that left her job after having a baby, right? There's sort of a stick
Oh,
around that.
that's interesting.
And I never thought I would be. I mean, even right in the delivery room, I was like, I'm gonna be fine to go back to work, and I'm gonna have no problem with this whatsoever, like no hesitation.
Hmm.
Things definitely changed once I had my son. There was definitely a change of heart. All the feelings came up, all the feels, and so I
Yeah.
took my 3 month maternity leave. I go back to work, and it was the hardest time of my life. Even with just the two, with my business and work, I'd already given up so many other things I was doing in my life. But even with just those two and adding a child, it was just way too much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were you when you were going through that time, how long were you in the role after your maternity leave before you wrapped things up and departed?
And even that was an interesting transition. So it was about 3 months before
Okay.
I went to my supervisor at the time, and I was super fortunate. She happened to be a mom of three boys with a stay-at-home husband, right?
Wow.
So I go to her, and I'm just like, I didn't even know what I was going to do yet. I'm like, I am beside myself. I am miserable. I literally started crying in her office, which I tried like heck not to do.
Hmm.
And I was like, I'm so miserable. And she's like, of all people, I get it. And she was just like, what do you need from me? And I just was like, oh my gosh, thank you. And wasn't even putting in my notice at that point. It was like a conversation I was having before the conversation because I just didn't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
And then at that point, so her and I started working together on like and I started applying for part-time jobs left and right because I'm like, I can't just quit my job. What am I gonna do? Right. And I'm
Hmm.
applying for jobs that didn't even make sense at this point, like minimum wage jobs, just so that I would have a steady paycheck. Really
Yeah.
didn't even a part-time position happened to open up at the bank, back office, which I'd never done, in like mortgage, I don't know, paperwork
Hmm.
pushing type position.
Yeah.
And my supervisor calls me. She goes, you need to apply for this. And I was like, what? And she's like, they need you. I said, but what's the description? She goes, it doesn't matter. They need you because they were so behind in the tech side of everything.
Oh.
Everybody was tech challenged in this
Oh yeah.
particular position. Like a day later, the hiring supervisor for that role comes into my office and he goes, okay, what do you want to do for me? And I was like, huh? And he's like, whatever you need. Apparently, I need you. This was a
Wow.
bank that even so at my level, I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have a laptop. I couldn't work from home where I was.
Hmm.
They gave me a part-time back office position with a laptop and a cell phone and allowed me to work from home. And within 3 months, I worked myself out of a job and doubled my business so that I didn't need that income anymore.
what a like I mean, first of all, it's so, I mean, sometimes going to your, boss and asking for help or even just communicating struggle is, I mean, an impossible task, right?
Hmm.
But then going and being able to be heard and listened to, and then someone who's like on your side, oh my gosh,
Oh yeah.
that's insane. Like that doesn't happen most cases, right? Whoa, okay.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel like the whole transition story was like it couldn't have been better and it was so meant to be. Like
oh, I
everything, the
love
way
that.
it worked out just felt like it was, how can I ignore this? And
Yeah.
we had a very real conversation at home, my husband and I. I was like, look, I am at my wit's end. I am miserable with like life in general.
Hmm.
Um, Banking will always be there. My
Yeah.
business will not. It does not feel right to give up my business. I said, and here's the deal. Like, if I fall on my face, worst case scenario, we file bankruptcy and move on with life. How do you feel about that? And he went, okay.
Is your husband a pretty like go with the flow kind of person?
Very much so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Interesting.
Yeah.
Are
And
you a
and
go with the
not
flow
like
person?
no, I'm a type A for sure. I'm a firstborn, make a list for everything. Like,
Okay. Yeah. Um, wow. So I also worked in banking, right? And
yeah.
I started out at like the huge major business thing, right? Like I worked
Okay.
for Chase, and it was so funny because they were talking about how they're a technology leader and why this matters, right? And I was a very stuck sales rep, right? I didn't really want to pour myself into selling. It was just a job that, had some good upside for me and everything. And I loathed those conversations that like our
Mm,
claim to fame was like technology. And then I got the opportunity to move to a smaller bank, and
mm,
it was a regional bank, and they were still on like black screen CNET stuff, and I was like, oh my, like you couldn't appreciate it until you stepped out of that lane and saw just how most banks are very like almost Luddites. Like they
oh,
don't, like they know they need it, but they're not excited to do it because of all the compliance and regulation and everything. But I felt like I had like stepped into a portal like 25 years into the past just by changing the bank that I worked at. It was wild. So hearing you talk about, well, they need you, right?
yeah.
Did you have any struggles with, it sounds like you had a lot of buy-in. Did you have any friction about doing some of these changes and helping them get caught up on their technology side?
Oh, for sure. And you know what's funny is my entire 12-year banking career was with two banks, and like 11 of those were with the same bank, and the
Hmm.
last one was with this other bank. And I had the same thing happen that you're explaining here, where both were community banks, but the first one was very tech forward, and the second
Mm.
one, it was green screens, right?
Oh yeah.
And so it was that same kind of thing. And so, yeah, when I went back office, I remember I kind of did the same thing I do now with clients, where I was like, they told me, okay, this is going to be your job, and you have these like 5 steps of something to do. And I'm like, okay, well, I could do these 5 steps, or like I could automate these two and just do these three. What else you got?
Hmm.
And I think within the first 2 weeks, I had automated enough that they let their intern go. And then they, like I said, they set me up to be able to work from home. Like he did
Hmm.
say, you need to be here for the first week and, see the processes and all this stuff. And then you can start working from home. And I was like, okay. So, and literally over 3 months, it was like I cut my hours in half every month because I just started like, okay, well, we're just going to have this field pull this field instead of manually entering it every time. Okay. And they
Yeah.
went, oh, you can do that? Like, I think they were more mystified than like pushback, you know?
Yeah. Like, I mean, and it's wild because you get used to it and then you forget how much you learned, right? And so then,
Mm-hmm.
you show up, you start talking about, well, like I had a really great friend who was teaching me about extract, translate, and load processes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I was trying to move out of retail sales, right? I was like, okay, maybe there's more for this and maybe I can go figure it out. And like I like tech, but I didn't really know how to navigate it or use it or, anything else like that. And
Mm-hmm.
then you get so used to it that it's just very easy to kind of just assume everyone knows what you know, which is not super helpful.
Right.
Um, changing gears a little bit, right? The retail side of banking is a very interesting side of banking. And I remember whenever I got poached into banking, everyone was so like, "Oh, John's gonna have those banker's hours." Like, oh my gosh, right? All my kung fu friends were very excited because I was gonna have all this time because I wasn't in retail anymore. And then come to find out that retail banking is very much retail banking. But at least in the secondary banks that I worked in, the branch executives, right? The branch manager and everything,
Mhm.
they were kind of doing the business side of the banking and everything. Like they managed the business relationships, they had their own goals and quotas and everything. So I'm assuming you're probably fairly steeped in like navigating conversations,
Mhm.
being kind of the face of the bank and getting packages created for mortgages and different things like that. What did you have to either unlearn or shift your thinking on from like a sales perspective going out on your own?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, the biggest thing that I noticed was people were actually interested in talking to me. Um, it's sad but true. I will never forget the first time I showed up to a networking event with a different business card. I used to go. I mean, I had to attend networking events after hours, those types of things, probably three
Mm-hmm.
nights. That was just part of my job description. So yeah, the banker's
Yep.
hours weren't a real thing for me at that level. We opened at 7 in the morning and I was out at events till 7 at night.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and cold calling, that
Mm-hmm.
was part of the job and all of that stuff. So, and those were the things I did not like about banking. Um, but yeah, I remember I showed up to a networking event because that's how I knew to grow a business was to go out networking. That's what I
Yep.
knew based on my experience. And I show up and I had these business cards for, I think I was just calling it like outsourced business support at that point because, like I said, it was like 2009. Like the tech wasn't there yet. People didn't fully understand things. And I was still a little shady on even what I was offering because I was sort of making it as I went as far as what
Yeah.
I could support. And I remember somebody went, "Oh, what's that?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you want to talk to me?" Like I'm not even sure I have an answer for you
Mm-hmm.
because I was so used to people like me being like, "Yeah, I'm with such and such a bank," and people just like glazing over and being like, "Oh, that's nice," and I'm like, and just asking tons of questions about them and what do you do and what do you
Oh yeah.
need.
Mm-hmm.
So that was
Uh,
a big difference in the conversations. Yes, I had to be a lot more prepared to talk about what I offered and what I could do for them.
yeah, like and I love how you're talking about that because like there's as much room for it to be excited for the wrong reasons
Mm,
as it is to be that. I mean, banking is a commodity, right? And I've been
mm,
in those meetings. Oh, John, what do you do? Well, I work in banking and just, they immediately check out. And like working at Chase, like I was working there during the era of work the lobby, right? I don't know if this is a concept you're familiar with, but there was this one guy up in New York and he hated cold calling. And so he was successful with just kind of like jumping on people whenever they walked in the lobby, getting them over to the desk, convert. And so
mm-hmm,
it was the whole motion whenever I was there. And I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. And so I go through all the training, I get my licensing, and then I'm in the branch. And I remember the first day, like these people had been worked to death. And so this guy comes in, sees new banker, right? And I've got my chase tie on and everything. And he goes, and just turns towards the teller line and goes and gets on the line. And he's like, no, I don't want to confirm my information. And it was this earth-shattering moment of like, oh man, I thought people were going to be so excited to talk to me,
right.
and no, this is more or less the same things that I've been dealing with being in retail sales and people showing up and just wanting what they want and everything. And I remember just feeling like so stuck, right? And so then we
Mm,
started to have it like pile on the call nights and everything, to your point of like cold calling people and everything. And I just remember being so excited because we were very close to a country club, right? And so I was thinking like, oh my gosh, this is going to be great. This is going to be so easy. Well, if
mm-hmm,
you're living in a country club, you obviously are a private client banker,
mm-hmm.
right? Or customer, and I'm not allowed to talk to you at all. Right. So in my location, all we had were like the business runners and the local community people that didn't live at the country club. And it was such a struggle, right? Oh
Mm,
gosh, like, but just that whole thing of like, you want to come over and talk about your online banking? Right, the eyes just like fog over.
yes.
No one's excited to talk about it, but it's like this is going to help you, and like trying to be excited about it so that way you can try to get some of that energy into them. And Oh,
Or even trying to be excited about a quota of debit cards. It was
oh,
like, do we really, is this really a thing? Right?
yes,
So,
yes,
so yes, it's very different now when I feel like I have real solutions to offer. Not that a debit card and online banking is not a real solution for somebody that needs it, right? But
100%.
it's the idea of pushing those types of services that
Oh
is
yeah.
just, it's like a painful reminder, right? It's like PTSD. Um,
Going like leaving that retail environment and kind of going out on your own, right? I'm curious, just from like a manner of work, right? Because like in retail, there's always this thing of like be present, be available, like don't be too busy,
mm,
so that way you can work. If there's a question or if, hey, I need an account. Okay, cool, come on over and sit down. Always being like Johnny on the spot and everything else like that. We were talking in the pre-call about this idea of yours that I just love so much because I struggled with this and then I got better about it.
hmm.
Can you talk about not being endlessly available?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And again, this goes back to, when I went full time with my business, I had a 6-month-old at home, right?
Yeah.
And a couple months later, I was pregnant with number two. So my boys are 20 months apart, right?
Hmm.
Um, so when I'm not, if I'm at my desk, I am either on the phone or working on a project. When I'm not at my desk, I am with my family because I work from home. It is not ever a good time for me to answer a random phone call,
Hmm.
especially when I have no idea how long this phone call is going to be or what it's about. So very early on, and prior to banking, and even in banking, I was in retail, but prior to banking, I was in actual like retail in the mall, and I was
Hmm.
a
Same.
manager of a store in the mall. Okay. And
Hmm.
and it was that the customer's always right. You're right there at the door greeting them. It was that like instant need factor.
Yep.
And I was just like, I am not doing that anymore. So I literally put in every single one of my contracts that I do not answer unscheduled phone calls.
Has that ever shown up as friction in delivery? Have you ever had that client
Once
who
or
forgets
twice.
once or twice? Okay.
Yep, once
I
or twice.
love
I've
that.
I've I've actually lost at least one client due to this because they just wanted to be able to call me, and I was like, I'm sorry, that is never going to work for me.
Yeah. I love that. Right. Because
Hmm.
that was always it always felt forced to me whenever I was in retail to like always be available. And
Hmm.
I remember I had this manager because I worked in wireless retail, right? And
Oh
so I
yeah.
had this one manager, and he was never on the floor. He was always in the back, but he'd watch the camera, right? And
Mm.
so the phone would ring. He wouldn't answer it, but he would just look at the camera. And if we didn't answer within 3 rings, he would then send an email from that back office and be like, "Hey, why are we not answering the phone?" It was so weird. But then when I kind of made like, okay, I'm gonna try. I'm really gonna like invest myself in this thing. And we always overcorrect whenever we're in a season of change and everything.
Hmm.
And so I'm answering all the phone calls. I'm responding to every email, and I'm wasting and just blowing so much time. And then thankfully through like sales coaching and performance training and stuff of like your priorities are your priorities, and it's okay to focus on those priorities because you can't just be endlessly available.
Right.
And I really had to unwind a lot of that kind of retail thinking and stuff like that, so that way I could get there. But ultimately, now that I know that, I am uh, very tight-fisted with my time and who
Hmm.
gets my like actual cell phone number and different things like that because I
Oh
know
yeah.
that I need my focus for certain parts of the work. Oh, and
Absolutely. And the number of clients that have requested, my cell phone number so that they can text me. Email doesn't really work for me. Can you text me? And I'm like, I'm sorry, no.
yep,
That is
absolutely.
there's just certain lines of communication. Like if you want me to be able to keep track of what we're actually doing, like this is the line of communication. We have an online project management system. I have an email address that I'm happy to give you. And
Hmm.
here's my link so you can book an appointment with me anytime you want to talk on the phone. I mean, I
Yeah.
make myself available, right? But it has to be these channels. Otherwise, I could never manage it all.
100%, right? Boundaries matter, and if you don't
Hmm.
set them, you're going to run into them and someone's going to be irritated. And it might cost you a relationship because we didn't talk about it on the front end and align
Right.
expectations, you know?
Right. Absolutely. And I have had people before that for one reason or another, they get my cell phone number and they start texting me. And then I forget that they texted me. And I'm like, this is why you need to email me.
Yep.
Because like
Hmm.
that's where I look for the stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like that's why I have those lanes.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Like I'll get people on LinkedIn and they're like, okay, yeah, John, like I've seen your stuff. This is pretty cool. Here's my cell phone number. Just call me whenever. No, I'm not calling you.
Ain't gonna
Like,
happen.
ain't gonna happen, right? I'm pretty easy to get an appointment with. Let's just have an appointment and have a conversation because you're just inviting me to like probably call you at a really bad time, you
Right.
know? So
Right.
yeah. Um, we were also talking about this very interesting thing, right? Hiring is always difficult to do, right? And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people tend to hire people that are similar to them in personality and working style, and sometimes that's problematic and everything. But we were talking about that in your business, you need creative people, but you also need really good technical people. And I'm curious, how have you gotten better over, the duration of running your company at, knowing where it's a technical spot versus a creative spot and finding the right person to put into that seat?
Yeah, so it's definitely interview questions can be interesting when I'm going through the interview process because it does need to be someone who has creativity is harder to teach, right?
Mm,
So somebody that has kind of an eye for design or creative factors, like that's something that's a little more innate in a person and that can come out just through conversation and trying to find out like, give me some examples, tell me what you would do about this problem, et cetera, et cetera. And even like in tech problem solving, sometimes it requires creativity, right?
oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
and that's an even weirder hybrid right there.
100%.
So you have like tech implementation is one side of things and having the aptitude for that, and then creativity is the other side of things. And then there's these places where they meld in weird ways. But the tech side of things, as long as somebody has the ability to learn,
Mm,
and again, I usually ask certain questions about like how would you find the answer to this, and things like that. If they have the ability to learn, I feel like the tech side can often be taught, where the creative side is a little more, like I said, sort of a personality trait.
hmm
Um, yeah, so that has been an interesting combination just of things that we've learned over the years with different people. And something that I've noticed is so if you are hiring someone that already has a specific skill set, obviously you can look for that and you can, ask the right questions and get their experience. There have been times where I've gone outside of that, where I have found people that, interestingly enough, the medical industry actually translates really well to marketing and technology. And
Really?
this, yeah, and it's funny because I found this out actually because I had a friend of mine that wanted to try it out for a couple hours in the evening. She had a full-time job as a nurse. And I was
hmm
like, sure, what the heck? I'll teach you. So I brought her on board, added her to the team. She was amazing. I was like, how are you so good at this? This isn't your thing. You didn't go to school for business, you know nothing about marketing. Like everything
Yeah.
like I taught you. And okay, I'll toot my own horn. Maybe I'm an amazing teacher. But like you're really good at this. Like what? Like what's and she's like, well, it's all about like intuition and understanding people and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, okay, my day job. She's like, I'm looking at people's charts. And I'm like, oh, Mrs. Smith, your your salt or whatever, your sodium spiked today. Okay, let's look at it. What'd you have for dinner last night? Chinese food. We ordered out Chinese food. Oh, that's nice. Okay, that explains your sodium spike. Go throw out the leftovers. And Mrs. Smith goes, how did you know?
hmm
It's like, because everybody has leftovers with Chinese food, and I don't want to see this spike tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's the type of intuition that people in the medical field have that kind of it describes like buyer behavior when you think about it. And like how
100%.
they can actually think about like, oh, this image will resonate with this person and here's why.
Yeah.
Or this message will resonate with this person and here's why. Like they know people.
That is so because I spent some time in the medical field. That was my first
Okay.
field sales role, was selling like spinal implants and screws and things like that to surgeons and everything. And I mean, I ran screaming from that space because I was seeing mostly a lack of intuition and care
Ah,
and stuff like this.
okay.
So, but I like that idea of, I'm just seeing it as like you have incomplete information, but you have
Mm-hmm.
some information,
Mm-hmm.
and you must be able to like connect with this other person to see if it's true and very valid. Like, holy smokes, like that's such like a sales thing, right? Because you
Right.
might have like the lead form, you might have them on your ICP list or whatever, but if you're not really open to what they might be going through and everything, we overshoot the mark a lot. That is fascinating. Interesting.
Right. And in
Um,
medicine today, there's a lot of technology and application for that too. So again, you get that aptitude piece. So like the
yeah.
foresight, yeah, all of that stuff. So I've actually had a couple people work for me now that have had medical backgrounds that
Hmm,
it's worked out pretty well.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm curious, have you had to move anybody from like a creative seat into a more technical seat because they were thinking they were going to be creative, or that once they got the job it was going to open up creativity or different things like that? Have you had to make any kind of force moves because they weren't aware enough and maybe you didn't see it before?
Yes, and maybe not specifically like you're saying, but for different things for sure. People that I thought were going to be really great team leaders that ended up working kind of better on solo projects that we had to
Hmm.
shift things. And, um, people that for some reason, like graphical design on print would connect better, but they really were bad at video, or and we'd have to just maybe take certain tasks. I hate to say take certain tasks away, but it is kind of like that, and just having those conversations around like, hey, you're really great at X, let's keep you there,
Yeah,
right? Let's give you
absolutely.
more of that. Yeah.
Um, we were talking on the pre-call, and one of the things you were talking about was kind of leaning into the team in a very
Mm,
meaningful way, right? And you shared a little bit about how your like one of your best years was actually a year that you were out a lot because of
hmm
of some illness and everything. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's in all the books, right? Like it's
mm.
always this mode of, I didn't think it could run without me, and then I had to take a step away and stuff like this. And you know, you weren't going on like a, well, I'm just going to go on a mini retirement or vacation or anything else like this. You had an illness, right? That kind of took you out of pocket and everything.
hmm
Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So very early in 2023, so January 2023, I was diagnosed with breast cancer and stage one, and went through all the diagnostics, found out it was, it could have been so much worse. So I feel very fortunate that it wasn't as bad as it was, but it was still a thing to deal with. There were still surgeries. I did do radiation. There was, the whole first quarter of 2023, I was lucky to be able to work part time.
Wow.
And I had really been, I mean, if you looked at the years prior, typically I would say 2021, I was probably doing close to 50% of our billable hours, which is really not where any founder should be, right? It's
Agreed.
not where anybody that's also doing business development, sales, all that stuff should be.
Hmm.
By 2022, I actually had a really good team in place, and my team is small, so each person is critical, right? If they're
Yeah.
not pulling their weight, it makes a big impact on everybody else, and especially me. So 2022, I was fortunate. I had some really great people in place. Those skill sets of tech and creativity were awesome. They were able to really own like the clients as their own, and I didn't
Hmm.
have to micromanage a whole lot. So we were really getting into a good groove, which was good for me based on what was coming forward. So, beginning of 2023, I get diagnosed. I really had to step back. Everybody on my team just took two steps forward, basically, and
Wow.
filled in those gaps. I told the clients that needed to know. I eventually ended up pretty much telling everybody.
Hmm.
But I think, anything like this that takes the risk of us having to pull back on our business can often feel really scary to share.
Absolutely.
Even
Yeah.
when I was pregnant, I think I waited when I was pregnant until like a month before I was ready to deliver before I told anyone. And I was like, "Hey, I'm
Wow.
going to be taking some time off." And they're like, "Oh, what's going on?" I'm like, "I'm having a baby."
And they're like, oh, like in like 9 months, and you're like, no, about 5 weeks from now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I think they were always just so in shock, like, "I had no idea. How have you been working so much?" And I'm like, "I'm just that good." No. Like, so
So
this was kind of similar is I waited until the last minute. Like I actually waited, I think, until after surgery. And then I got to this point, and if anybody's ever been through radiation, it's a daily process for an
yeah.
entire month. And for me, I live in rural Maine. And that is an hour drive each way to appointments. And that is all kinds of other stuff, plus just all the unknowns that can
Yeah.
come along with medical treatments. So I just knew I was going to have to step back. So I told the people that I was meeting with regularly, look, I've had this thing. I'm dealing with this. They were all super supportive. Like I said, I took 3 steps back. My team all took 2 steps forward. And I ended up having the best revenue year in the history of the company.
That's amazing. I love
Mm-hmm.
that. Uh, I'm curious though, because being driven enough to go out on your own and prioritizing goals and having goals and everything else like this. The way that you talk about it now, that we caught it early, it could have been so much worse and everything else like that. There is a little bit of a control freak. I think in most founders and everything. So when you first heard the news, uh were you mad that it was gonna impact your goals? Did you have any kind of weird holding it in that? Like, not so much of like, I'm fearful for my life or but like this weird little pocket of like, "Man, this means I'm not gonna hit my goals," and like, "What does that mean?" Like, did you have anything like that?
I think we have that feeling for anything that happens in our lives, right? Like, I mean, you have a car accident and you're like, oh, I don't have time for this week, right?
Exactly,
I mean,
yeah.
like anything that comes up, even your car being in the shop. I mean, so yeah, I mean, my instant reaction was definitely like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, there's all the emotions. What did I do wrong? How am I going to tell my kids? There's
Yeah.
all the things, and no matter what stage it is, there is always that thought of, okay, what is my life expectancy on this? Shoot, I didn't get life insurance in time. We need to
Yeah.
set up an estate plan. Like there's all kinds of emotions and things that come out of something that big, right? And I
Mhm.
think, like, again, even a bad car accident could have a similar impact on someone's psyche, right?
100%.
Of that,
Yeah.
like, okay, something could happen to me tomorrow. I don't have everything in order. And so I definitely went through all of those emotions, all of those steps. There's still some things that I'm still putting off that I probably shouldn't be. Um, but yes, there was a sense of like I had plans for this year and darn it, life just threw me a curveball. But there was also a sense of knowing, okay, this is 1 year. I am committing to beating this thing. This is the year, and we're going to be done with it. And 2025, 2024, this is not going to be on the calendar.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obstacle is the way, right? One of my favorite
Mm-hmm.
books, and that's essentially it, right? Like when something shows up that's between you and the goal, you attack it with the same ferocity that you do your regular goals. I love
Right.
that.
Yep. And
Um,
and actually, I will say, so when I found out I was going to have radiation and the treatments or whatever, I was like, okay, so it's got to be done before summer because I'm wearing a bathing suit and I'm sitting on the beach.
I love that, right?
So yes,
Um,
just different goals.
when you first got your diagnosis, I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious if there was were you able to go into that mode automatically of like, okay, we're just gonna focus in, we're gonna beat this thing and be done with it? Was it like, you know what? I'm not gonna tell anybody. I'm just gonna stay. I'm gonna try to just work through this. Like, how are
I
you
wish
holding
I
it?
could I wish I could say that's how I responded. I really do because it probably would have been a lot more gracious than what I actually did.
Hmm.
I I'm a talker. Surprise, surprise. And so I do have probably a hard time keeping anything secret. And I think like an hour after the doctor's appointment, my kid's teacher called me and I was like, yeah, I can't talk about this right now. I just found out I have cancer. Like I was like,
Wow.
yeah, I was he was like, what? And I was like, yeah. So no,
That's
I was not
crazy.
good. I was not good at keeping it to myself. I think within a week I had told all the important people in my life.
Okay.
I'm very fortunate. Actually, in 2021, we moved. My family and we moved, and we were about an hour and a half away from most of my family. And I
Hmm.
now am 2 houses down from my mother.
Oh,
So again, like just kismet stuff lining up kind of thing is 2021 we moved, and then I needed to be close to family, quite honestly, for
wow.
all of this when all of this was happening. So I remember walking down to my mother's house several times. And, sometimes we would sit and cry, and sometimes we would yell, and sometimes we would, and it was a process for sure. But
Absolutely.
I talked about it a lot, and I wasn't screaming about it on social media. Like you will see nothing about it on my Facebook page or anything like that.
Hmm.
But anytime somebody had a question or anytime something, it was like, I have no problem. I'll tell you what I learned. I also went deep into research mode, which again, after talking to me for about 5 minutes is probably a huge shocker. But yes, I went deep into research mode, totally overwhelmed myself, which I think is also another common mistake with any
Yeah.
big thing that happens in our lives. I mean, again, you get pregnant. How many books do you read? How many things do you collect? How many
Hmm.
websites do you research? Right. So I did all the stuff.
Did you feel any resistance about telling the people on your team, right? Or asking them to, if they could step up, like would they step up? Like did you feel any resistance towards having that conversation with this team that you were like putting, time into and really trying to perfect?
No, in that I had no resistance or hesitation at all. Actually, they knew what I was going through before the diagnosis. When,
Oh,
because before the diagnosis, there's a biopsy and there's a this and that, you have several appointments before.
yeah.
And we have a weekly team meeting. And as I was going through it, I mean, we usually have a little check in at the beginning. And I was like, I have doctor's appointments. I hate going to the doctors. I haven't been to the doctors in like 10 years. Maybe that's part of the problem.
Hmm.
And I was like, and this is what's happening. And I remember one or two people on my team was like, oh, yeah, I went through that a couple of years ago. It'll be fine. I mean, the statistical likelihood of me actually having the diagnosis I had was about 2%. Like it was ridiculously low. And so we were all just like, okay, I'm just talking about this because it's something that's happening and it's going to all like water under the bridge. And so when I came back to that next meeting and I was like, yeah, it's not water under the bridge. We have like a storm to deal with this year.
Wow.
And they were just like, wow, oh my gosh. And they rallied. They totally rallied behind me. They were amazing. I got so many emails. I mean, I had a contractor, not even an employee, a contractor at that time that had been working with me for over 10 years. So she remembered back when I was pregnant with my kids, right?
Hmm.
And I remember her sending me this message just saying, like, you're one of the strongest women I know. You're going to go through this with such grace and you're going to be so amazing on the other side of this. I can't wait to hear like basically your testimony about this, and this might make me
Yeah.
a little
Wow.
yeah.
So, one of my favorite lines around business is that everything is always twice as long as you think and double the cost and
Mm.
everything. So, d- did you hit the goal of knocking it all out in that 1 year and having it completely
Okay.
off the calendar, or did it kind of bleed over into the next year or anything like that?
Yeah, monitoring is basically for the rest of my life, so that doesn't count.
Sure.
I
Okay.
won't count that. But yes, no, I finished all treatments before summer.
Wow, that's
Yep.
amazing. When coming out of that, I'm
Mm,
curious, like being the driver and this being your
mm.
baby, coming back and seeing that revenue was up and that that it was kind of running pretty well without you. Did you have any head trash or limiting beliefs of like coming back into it that you needed to reprove yourself, that you needed to,
Oh,
scale the
interesting.
mountain and get to this next level of performance or any of that stuff?
Interesting question. I actually did not. I didn't really have. I think I came back in like, okay, well, now that I have this extra time, what's next?
Wow.
Right?
Hmm.
Like I
I
think
love
that
that.
was more my mentality. And that being said, so I did my team did get a little stressed out during that time. They did burn out a little bit. They did, as I came back in, they did probably take one step back
Hmm.
because I had been a little overwhelmed. And of course I wasn't gonna, have a problem with that. They had been so amazing.
Yeah.
And then two of my four key players ended up getting amazing opportunities elsewhere, and I lost them in the same week.
Oh my gosh.
With one of them with lots of notice, and one of them it was just like split.
Gotta
It,
go.
it was just that, yeah. And they tried so hard to work with me and not have it be the same week and all this stuff, but it was like we did this whole 180 as a team after that.
Wow.
Yeah. So there also was some of that happened at like the end of 2023, really. Um,
Interesting.
yeah.
Um,
So
in that mode, right? You have two
Mm,
key people leaving, you're coming back into the pocket and everything else like this. I think I think one of the coolest things that when you're a leader you can do is when you're abundant, whenever someone has a really cool opportunity, right? And you can just see it as like a great thing for them, right? And being in sales and having some success and everything, like, I moved around a lot and sometimes it was like, oh, you're leaving, and
yeah.
then I've also had a couple of really great managers and bosses who were like, okay, what do you need? Kind of thing. um, I'm curious, how did you show up in that mode with all of that potential, stress around you and trying to get back in the pocket? Were you able to get to like show that abundance, or was it kind of like now's not the time. I wish this wasn't happening right now.
I mean, quietly on the backside, I probably felt like the latter, but I tried to show up for my team in that way. I mean, and I can recall the conversation. So there was one woman that was working for me that was full time that basically she was getting ready to have a baby and she decided she just couldn't do it all anymore and she needed to move to be closer to family, all the stuff that I could relate to.
Hmm.
Um, and in some ways I really was like, oh, but this is the perfect job for a stay-at-home mom. We should try to work
Hmm.
this out. And so she did. I mean, she went down to work in just like 2 hours a week just to see if she could make it work. And I was grateful for whatever she would give me. And eventually she did end up being done. The
Yeah.
other woman, and this one was the one that was more of a quicker transition. She hadn't been with me quite as long, and she reached out and actually called me, and I was like, oh, it's never good when she calls me. It was like, and so I answered the phone, and she's like, all right, so I have some news, and I was like, okay, and she's like, her church had offered her a position as a director with full benefits and all the stuff, and I'm just like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is so awesome, right? And she was like, she just stopped. She goes, really? And I was like, yes. I was like, when do you start? Please tell me you give me at least 2 weeks. And she was like, I can't believe that's your response. I've never had that response when I've given my notice before. So I like to, based on that reaction, I would say I was at least hopefully gracious about the whole transition.
I love that. And like the person I'm thinking about, who showed up in that way for me is the person that I was not expecting to, right? And it had
Mm,
come after lots of other interactions where people were frustrated because it meant that they were going to have to replace me or they were going to have to
right.
carry some load on their own and things like that. And so, that always stands out to me as as an example that I try to follow if I'm working with someone and they get an opportunity to go do something else, right?
Right.
Um, Shifting the conversation a little bit, just because
Mm.
I really want to respect your time and really, we could probably talk for 3 days about all these things. Going to move into some of the repeating questions I have for people
Okay.
on here, right, to try to help out founders who are newer on the path. When you're thinking about automation and AI and all of these things, right,
Hmm.
and you're talking to a brand new founder, like what advice would you give them so that way they don't overshoot the mark, they don't try to automate from the lab, so that way they can do it the right way?
So I think it's a combination of learning and execution. And I think you need to take the time to, even if it's just that micro learning in the morning with your coffee, take the
Hmm.
time to watch the videos and learn from others' mistakes and successes. And before you jump in head first,
Hmm.
you want to jump in. Don't be hesitant to jump in, but there's also right now things are moving so fast that sometimes it's like you don't need to maybe jump in the day you hear about it. Like
Yeah,
hear about something, learn about it, give yourself a couple of days, don't feel like you're behind the mark.
I love that. I love that. It's just too easy to play a bad comparison game, especially with social media
Mhm.
and some of these networking communities and stuff like this, and huge, like thing that I have to think about is like, don't compare my first step to someone else's thousandth step, right? Or
Yes.
like really kind of approach it the way I need to approach it. Love
Right.
that. Um, Next one. What is a piece of business advice that you can now appreciate, but you kind of had to learn it the hard way?
It might be almost similar is like kind of that it's okay to grow slow.
Mm,
Um, and you know, I know it like it takes money to make money, and sometimes that can force a little bit of slow growth. But just this year, we have launched a new system that we're now offering called Marketecs Engine. And it was like, okay, here we are, December 15th. It was a couple days ago. And I get this alert from Stripe that I owe VAT tax in multiple countries. I don't even know what VAT tax is at this point. And I've got like 2 weeks to figure this out. Now, it was incorrect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the reason I didn't really know about it. But what I was thankful for was that at that point, according to them, I only had like $2,000 in these international sales. I'm like, man, if I had gone gangbusters and grown this thing to like $1 million in the first year, or whatever the hype number is these days,
Mm-hmm.
um, think about what I could have owed in taxes or the mistakes I could have made by kind of
Yeah.
growing too fast. And I think that is that kind of comparison. Like you said, when we compare our step 2 to somebody else's step 10, it's so easy to do when you're starting a new business to be like, oh, why aren't I making 6 figures in 6 weeks? Right.
Yep.
Um, and I think that that's the type of thing that, especially when I first started, I was like, oh, I'm a failure. And
Oh
now
yeah.
I look at it like, no, it's not a failure. It's respectable growth. It's consistent growth. It's growth that's actually maintainable.
I love that. Um, I'm curious, we didn't really talk about this on the pre-call, so this is a bit of a surprise for you, but I'm curious if there is a piece of business advice that, and we can go either way on this, that is uh, not helpful in the marketing agency lane, but is a good piece of like entrepreneurial founder advice. Or maybe there's a thing that doesn't make sense for any other type of founder or entrepreneur that marketing agency founders need to be thinking about.
Ooh. Um, I mean, I do kind of go two different ways with this question when I think about it, because
Please.
well, I think about one of the questions you did ask me prior to was the unpopular ideas,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yep.
I think about one of my pieces of advice to people about marketing, and I guess this could kind of go into what I would tell even marketing agencies, um, is that I don't recommend startups spend a ton of money on their branding, website, and their marketing. I kind of believe more in bootstrapping, because I think 90% of businesses will change all of that within the first 3 years.
Yeah.
So if that's my advice to business owners, then I guess my advice to marketing agencies would be to be careful when recommending huge packages to startups. Just
Oh.
because they have the money doesn't mean that's what they should be doing. And you could be burning your bridges and burning your relationships. You could be that agency that somebody comes to me after complaining, yeah, they took $20,000 of my money and blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's the relationship building,
I love
really
that.
understand.
Right. Don't shoot for the moon just because you think that you can. Don't
Mm-hmm.
get too excited that they've got a big bucket of budget that they're excited to pour into this thing. Like, stay the course, do the right thing.
Right. Yeah.
I
Because
love
the
that.
more you really focus on what they really need versus just what they can afford, the better
Mm-hmm.
that relationship's going to be. I mean, and that's why I have clients for 10 years,
Yeah,
you
for
know?
sure. Last question, Catherine, and then I'll let you get on with your day. And once again, really appreciate you coming on. Um, you've been in the space for a long time, and you work in arguably a space that is very misunderstood, right? Automations and process creation and things like that. With everything that you've seen and all the changes that have come, what would be your advice to someone who's like starting up day one as a founder today?
A founder of any business.
Yeah, any business.
Okay. It would be to test your concepts before you put a ton of effort into them. I mean, I think, like that elevator speech, the old elevator speech adage,
Oh
where
yeah.
you're supposed to try 10 of them and see which one lands, right?
Mm-hmm.
So before you print your business cards, before you put your website out, like go out and just talk to people about your idea.
Yeah, for
And I
sure.
and I think today, like with the whole like speed to lead, speed to launch, all this stuff, it can feel a little scary to do that, because you put your idea out there, you're also risking somebody else copying it.
Yep.
So there is a fine line there. I'm actually working on something new right now that I've been working on for a couple of weeks, and we're going to be, I think by the time this comes out, it will already be live. So I think I can talk about it. But I've been building an AI clone of myself.
Okay.
But I built it in two ways. I built a realistic, and then I built the evil version.
Wh- Uh, uh, I don't even. I think I think my questions have questions. Uh,
Yeah.
what? Can you just talk a little bit more about the differences between these two?
Sure. So basically it's going to be so that I can turn out more YouTube videos without always have to get in front of a camera. I can give a script to my AI clone and build out videos, right? It's
Oh,
being able
interesting.
to do more content creation. So it's still my ideas, it's just not me having to film, which sometimes can take extra time.
Oh
And it
yeah.
means my team could now make videos of me to put on YouTube. So again, could take me out of the mix if I'm
Hmm,
comfortable with the people doing the content creation, right? So
that is
there's that.
interesting.
Now, the evil twin idea
Hmm.
is because I'm looking basically for something that will be entertainment value. I'm looking because I'm building my YouTube channel, right? And
Hmm.
yeah, I've got tutorials. I'm talking about tech. I'm talking about marketing. But recently, I've had a couple of people just really come at me with some terrible marketing ideas or strategies. And I'll put something out there on Facebook and I'll get a lot of comments like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, somebody did that to me and it's so bad." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm doing something with this." So I have made
Interesting.
an evil, unethical marketer who is going to have YouTube videos of what not to do.
I can't wait for that. Like, please send me some links as soon as that thing is live because I can't wait to go check it out.
So, and this is
Um,
the type of conversation that I mean. Like by me talking about it now, I risk a little bit of somebody copying me before I get it out there, right? But this is a new idea. This is a new so it's kind of the same idea as just starting a new business. Any new idea. The more you
mhm,
talk and gauge people's reactions, you get to see
yeah,
is it a good idea, right? But you have to
absolutely.
kind of gauge that a little bit. And so I love your reaction to this. And that's been a similar reaction to everybody so far. So we'll see when it actually goes live if it does what I think it's going to do. But
Uh,
yeah, so that's kicking off in January.
very
Um
cool.
yeah.
That is awesome. Please send me a link to that as
I
soon as it is
will.
live. I can't wait to go check that out. Kathrine, really appreciate you coming on and being like so open and honest and transparent about it. Because you know the founder's path is difficult, right? There's a lot
Mhm.
of shiny stuff. There's a lot of opportunities to get stuck. There's a lot of opportunities to maroon yourself in solitude and not have any community or ways of getting help. So really appreciate you coming on here. If people want to come learn more about what you're working on, or if they want to come check you out on YouTube and everything else like that, where's the easiest place to connect with you?
Yeah, so marketecs.com is our website. You're going to find everything there pretty much. And on YouTube, it is Marketecs as well. So,
Awesome. All right, Kathrine, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I really think this is going to help some people out and really appreciate you coming in and just laying it all out.
yeah, thank you for having me. This is fun.
You're welcome. Cheers. Have a great day.
You too.